In my previous video, I talked about the Japanese remake of Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven, a film that practically closed the book on the classic western and still stands as one of the best ever made. I broke down the remake, how surprisingly great it is, and something struck me once the video went live. Wow, it all came full circle. Kurosawa makes Seven Samurai, Hollywood turns it into the Magnificent Seven, and decades later, Japan takes one of Hollywood's most revered westerns and remakes Unforgiven. But the other night, right as I put my head on the pillow and started drifting off to dreamland, I sat up with a realization.
There is another.
So, here it is. Back in 1961, Akira Kurosawa made a jidaigeki film called Yojimbo, starring the incomparable Toshiro Mifune as the Wandering Ronin, and Tatsuya Nakadai as the pistol-wielding villain Unosuke. The story was simple. A Ronin arrives in a small town where competing crime lords fight for supremacy. Each boss tries to hire the newcomer as a bodyguard. A full-on civil war erupts, with Sanjuro, the name given to our Ronin, watching from the sidelines as chaos unfolds. The film was so good that Kurosawa made the follow-up Sanjuro the very next year, both released by Toho, the studio behind Seven Samurai and, of course, Godzilla. Why am I bringing up Toho? Because in 1964, Sergio Leone made A Fistful of Dollars, the first in his Man with No Name trilogy, starring Clint Eastwood, and Kurosawa was not happy about it. When asked, he famously said, "A fine movie, but it was my movie." Now, copyright laws in Japan work a bit differently than elsewhere, so let's take a tiny little side quest. School's in session with Jay! To keep it simple, Japanese copyright law is split into two categories: author's rights and neighbouring rights. So copyright is basically a convenient umbrella term rather than one unified concept. Japan joined the Berne Convention back in 1899, meaning its laws align with most international regulations. That 1899 law protected works for 30 years after the author's death. Mostly written works. Since TV didn't exist yet, photography was still in its awkward teenage phase, and movies, well, Edison had a monopoly on that, which is basically why Hollywood happened. Then, in 1970, the duration was extended to 50 years, or 50 years after publication for unknown authors and corporations. In 2007, following a lawsuit from Toho over the rights to Kurosawa's films, the Tokyo District Court ruled that for films released in 1970 or earlier, copyright extends until 38 years after the director's death. This effectively pulled hundreds of public domain films back into copyright. Since Kurosawa died in 1998, his works won't enter the public domain until either 2036 or 2068, depending on how the rulings shake out. Getting back to A Fistful of Dollars, Toho sued Sergio Leone, and in return, he ignored them, and ultimately settled out of court, reportedly for 15% of the film's receipts and $100,000, and the rest is history. Now fast forward a couple of years later to 1966, Sergio Corbucci teams up with Franco Nero to make a little spaghetti western called Django. That film eventually inspires Tarantino's Django Unchained in 2012. Incredible movie, but before that, in 2007, there was another Django film, a Japanese Django film, directed by my boy Takashi Miike, and it even stars Quentin Tarantino in the opening. Oh my god, I love this film, let's get into it. In the dusty crossroads of cinema history, every so often a new gunslinger wanders into town. Someone who doesn't play by the rules, doesn't look the part, and definitely isn't supposed to be there. And in the mid-2000s, that gunslinger was Takashi Miike, the man known for Audition, Ichi the Killer, and more films than most directors make in 3 lifetimes, suddenly rode into the western genre like a whirlwind in a kimono, cowboy boots, and a suspiciously large grin. A western? From him? But that was exactly the point. Miike wasn't interested in paying polite homage to Sergio Leone. He wasn't making a Japanese western. He was drawing his own 6-shooter, spinning the barrel, and firing off something completely unrecognisable, yet undeniably rooted in the classics. That impulse to reinvent, distort, and celebrate all at once became the beating heart of what would eventually become Sukiyaki Western Django, Miike's wild, genre-scrambling showdown with cinema history. At its core, Sukiyaki Western Django is a classic story dressed in Miike's wildest clothes, a drifting gunman, a broken town, 2 warring factions, and a whole lot of blood, swagger, and style. The story takes place in the remote dust-choked town of Utah, a place long past its glory days. What's left is a fragile truce-turning, time-ticking bomb between 2 rival clans. The Hickey clan in red, ambitious, ruthless, and willing to burn the world down for power, and then the Genji, which are whites, cold, disciplined, and equally determined to rule what's left of the town. Even in the film's opening, Tarantino drops the line,
sort of like that War of the Roses, you know?
And he's right. The real War of the Roses was a brutal civil conflict in Britain between the House of Lancaster, the Red Rose, and the House of York, the White Rose, from 1455 to 1485. These days, if 2 British people have beef, we settle it by seeing who can drink the most and then karaoke Sweet Caroline without throwing up. Miike took that piece of history and injected it straight into the film's DNA. Into this powder keg walks the gunman, nameless, expressionless, and very much done with everyone's issues. He arrives looking for a reason to stay, and finds one in the form of a town full of secrets, grudges, and buried violence. Both sides try to recruit him, both sides underestimate him, and both sides pay for it. As the gunman quietly plays the clans against each other, we uncover the town's deeper tragedies. A grieving woman seeking revenge, a child caught in the crossfire of generations, and a past soaked in more blood than either gangs are willing to acknowledge. Everything escalates towards a final showdown, a bullet opera of swords, revolvers, betrayals, and full Miike madness, where the gunman steps fully into the role fate clearly wants from him. Not a hero, not a saviour, just the only man brave enough to clean up a town that forgot how to save itself. It's a tale as old as the Western. It just so happens to be told with kabuki snarls, Shakespearean melodrama, spaghetti Western swagger, and Japanese myth slapped on top. When Takashi Miike announced he was making a Western, most people assumed they had misheard him. Miike? A Western? The man known for Audition, Ichi the Killer, and roughly 300 other films, most of which he made between breakfast and lunch, was stepping into cowboy territory? But that's exactly what happened in the mid-2000s, when Miike decided to fuse the Italian spaghetti western, classic Chambara films, and his own genre-defying chaos into one subject, Sukiyaki Western Django. And like everything Miike touches, the production was not normal. Miike had always been drawn to border-crossing cinema, movies that treat genre like a buffet. Westerns, however, were a long-time love of his. In interviews, he talks about watching Sergio Leone films as a child, being hypnotised by the landscapes, the gunfights, the operatic pacing. He always wanted to make a Western that wasn't just a Japanese take on the genre. He wanted something that felt like it existed in a universal dream space. The Old West filtered through Japanese mythology and pop culture remixing. The result was the idea of a world where gunmen dress like yakuza, samurai swagger like cowboys, and the whole thing feels like a fever dream shot through a ramen strainer. That guiding philosophy, a Western that isn't a Western, becoming the backbone of the production. Why English? Yes, really. One of the most infamous production choices was Miike's decision to have the entire Japanese cast perform in English. Not dubbed, not subtitled, spoken English dialogues. Miike believed that if he shot the whole film in Japanese, viewers would automatically categorize it as a Japanese Western. But forcing the cast to speak English made the movie linguistically dislocated. More spaghetti Western, less traditional Shambara. Actors trained phonetically for weeks, memorizing English lines they often didn't fully understand. Miike didn't care if it sounded correct, he wanted the texture of English filtered through Japanese voices. Stylized, artificial, theatrical. Think of it like kabuki but with cowboy hats. The cast is a mix of Miike regulars and heavy hitters. Hideaki Ito as the gunman, Yusuke Isaya as Yoshitsune, Koichi Sato as Kiyomori, and then Quentin Tarantino. Not only did Tarantino appear in the opening sequence as a mysterious old storyteller, but he shot his scenes in a single day. Tarantino was already a massive Miike fan. He even had Miike direct a segment of Hostel for fun. So when Miike called, Tarantino basically did a Goku and teleported to the set. His presence also served as a symbolic validation. If you're making a Japanese spaghetti western homage, having Tarantino bless it like it's being knighted by the Pope of movie nerds or something. Production built an entire western town, including saloons, wooden walkways, ruined shacks, and dusty streets, in Yamanashi Prefecture, a mountainous region in central Japan. And here's the twist. Miike didn't want it to look like a perfect Leone reproduction. Instead, he designed the town with exaggerated angles, warped proportions, and a slightly dreamlike artificiality. Everything feels like a memory of a western rather than the real thing, just like the movie itself. Cast members had to wear layers of stylized period costumes that blended Japanese and American motifs. Imagine kimono-inspired ponchos, Yakuza-tailored vests, and cowboy boots that looked like they were sewn by a wandering monk. Comfort was not a priority. Action scenes were choreographed with a mix of Chambara sword dynamics and Western shootout framing. Miike's style, fast, loose and surprising, pushed the stunt teams into new territory. There's an improvised punk rock energy to the action. Gun duels shot like samurai duels, sword clashes filmed like Western standoffs, and Miike constantly asking everyone to go bigger, go stranger. He reportedly encouraged actors to find moments of theatrically heightened expression. Leone meets kabuki meets anime. When the film premiered, critics were puzzled. Some loved the audacity, others were baffled by the English dialogue choices or the narrative's mythic looseness. But over time, Sukiyaki Western Django has become a cult favourite and a milestone in Miike's career. A glorious, genre-bending anomaly that only he could have made. It stands as both a love letter to the Western genre and a completely deranged reinterpretation of it. And that's why it's so unforgettable. This all brings me round to round it all up into a neat little package. When I said we'd come full circle with Unforgiven, I think I was wrong. It had been done 6 years prior with Sukiyaki Western Django, but where Forgiven was the artistic love, care and attention, Django is more like the punk rock brother who defies what's expected of the genre and makes its own rules, which is exactly how Takashi Miike makes his films. It's pure entertainment, mixing spaghetti western, grindhouse, historic inspiration, and of course, Quentin Tarantino. Definitely give it a watch if you haven't, and if you have, let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see you all at high noon. Thank you so much for watching, and if you want to watch my video on the Japanese Unforgiven, click right here. Go on, and drop a sub while you're at it. It's free.